and something goes wrong. That uncertainty is exactly what kept institutions on the sidelines for years. And now, suddenly, that uncertainty is being removed piece by piece. This is how regulation actually works in the real world. They don't come out with fireworks and say everything is approved. They quietly publish guidance, let institutions start operating inside those boundaries, and then lock it in permanently once the system is already moving. By the time the public notices, the positioning is already done. And the timing here matters because look at what happened immediately after. XRP spot ETF volume exploded. We're talking about one of the highest intake days ever, roughly $54 million in volume, followed by continuation the very next day on pace to push even higher. Here's the key detail that most people are ignoring. This happened in a down market. Bitcoin was getting hit, altcoins were bleeding, sentiment was negative, retail was not rushing in. Retail buys green candles, not red ones. That's just how human psychology works. So if it's not retail, who is it? It's allocation money, balance sheet money, institutional positioning. This is not speculation, this is preparation. Institutions do not chase hype. They move early, quietly, and they build positions when assets are ignored or misunderstood. And this is where you need to stop asking why price hasn't moved yet and start asking why volume is surging when nobody is excited. That's the tell. Markets move before announcements, not after. By the time headlines flip bullish, the easy money is already gone. Now tie this back to what's happening politically. Ripple and other crypto leaders have been meeting directly with U.S. senators about market structure, custody standards, and jurisdiction between the SEC and the CFTC. At the same time, we're told the markup for the market structure bill is delayed until 2026. Most people hear that and think, oh, that's bad news, delays. But that's not how power works. You don't freeze the board while the players are still moving their pieces. When timelines get pushed publicly, it usually means the private work is already far along. The people in the room already know the direction. The public just doesn't yet. And that's why this feels strange. Regulations are moving, ETF volume is exploding, central banks are rushing timelines, and yet the broader market narrative is still confusion and doubt. That gap between reality and perception is where major repricings are born. Now, this is where the narrative completely breaks down for most people, because once you step back and stop looking at price, what you see instead is behavior, and behavior never lies. Let's connect a few dots that, on their own, might look unrelated. Ripple and other major crypto leaders recently met directly with U.S. senators led by Tim Scott to discuss digital asset market structure. That meeting wasn't about hype, and it wasn't about when moon. It was about custody standards, SEC versus CFTC jurisdiction, trading rules, and the framework that will govern this space for the next decade or longer. This is not retail conversation. This is rulebook level conversation. And right after that, we're told the market structure markup is delayed until 2026. Most people hear that and think, oh, that's bad news, more waiting. That's the wrong conclusion. You don't freeze the board while the players are still moving their pieces. You pause public action when private positioning is still underway. The people in those rooms already understand where this ends. The delay isn't uncertainty, it's sequencing. At the same time, you've got major macro voices like Tom Lee coming out and talking about new all-time highs potentially forming early next year. Now, whether you agree with Tom or not isn't the point. What matters is timing. He's pointing to January. That lines up perfectly with regulatory momentum, ETF maturation, and the early stages of liquidity easing. This isn't a price call, it's a timeline alignment. Historically, Bitcoin moves first when liquidity conditions shift. Then capital rotates. And where does it rotate? Into assets that institutions view as infrastructure, not experiments. That's why this matters for XRP. Now add Europe to the equation. Christine Lagarde just called for urgent digital euro regulation. Not we're studying it, not we're exploring it. Urgent, that word matters. Central banks do not rush unless they feel pressure. Pressure from competition, pressure from timelines, pressure from being left behind. CBDCs don't function in isolation. They require interoperability. They require instant settlement. They require neutral liquidity bridges. That's not opinion. That's system design. And this is where people still underestimate XRP's positioning. Look at SBI, one of Ripple's closest institutional partners. Their own investor presentations now openly show a dual stablecoin strategy, one tied to JPY, one tied to USD. with Ripple's RLUSD running on the XRP ledger. That's not speculation. That's documented strategy. Stablecoins are the fuel, settlement rails are the engine.